And we begin tonight with Danny Spiewak live in Mankato, where President Trump visited today. Danny?
Well, Randy and Julie, after making a brief stop in the Twin Cities today, President Trump spent about an hour on the ground here in Mankato. He is the first sitting U.S. president to visit Mankato since George W. Bush in 2004, 16 years ago. And while the president used the opportunity to lay out a vision for what he thinks should happen in his second term, there were protesters in downtown Mankato, about 7 miles away from the airport hangar where he was speaking, and top Democratic officials in Minnesota blasted what they called, quote, divisive rhetoric. President Trump landed in Mankato in full campaign mode.
I think this is going to be the most important election in the history of our country.
After losing Minnesota by fewer than 45,000 votes 4 years ago, Trump is looking to become the first Republican to win here since Richard Nixon. If re-elected, he promises more tax cuts and continued tariffs on foreign steel in a nod to Minnesota's Iron Range.
Look at your mining industry. It was crushed by dumping tons and tons of cheap iron and steel into our country. I saw what was happening. I did something about it.
Turning to the Twin Cities, Trump tied Joe Biden to defund the police movements, even though Biden doesn't actually support that. And he talked about the Minneapolis City Council proposal to replace MPD with the new public safety system that retains some form of law enforcement, currently under Charter Commission review, although not a done deal, as Trump suggested.
They're not even talking about it. They're terminating the police department. These people are crazy. And by the way, when I sent in the National Guard, that's when it all stopped.
Governor Walz, not Trump, sent in the Minnesota National Guard, but the president pledged support to businesses damaged in the unrest following George Floyd's killing, a month after FEMA denied the state's request for funding.
Their businesses were burned down, gone, and they don't know what they're going to do, but we're going to try helping them to get them rebuilt.
As Trump spoke at the airport, protesters marched in downtown Mankato. Governor Walz criticized Trump's handling of the pandemic and, quote, divisive rhetoric, while Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan said the president has tried to, quote, divide this country along the lines of race and class. Speaking in a state with more than 100,000 refugees, Trump promised to keep slashing refugee admissions, policies Biden has pledged to reverse.
He would overwhelm Minnesota with refugees from terror hotspots, depleting public services.
Near the end of his speech, he then targeted Representative Ilhan Omar again, who responded by saying Trump's, quote, hate and xenophobia is not welcome here.
Well, Danny, usually on these kind of campaign stops, they talk about local politicians, try to help out local races. Was there any of that today?
Yeah, Julie, that was a clear strategy by the president today, and it's significant because I'm standing here in the 1st Congressional District, one of the tightly contested races in all of the country. Jim Hagedorn, a Republican, currently represents it and just won narrowly 2 years ago against Dan Feehan. He has a rematch coming up here in November. This, of course, is the seat that Governor Walz used to hold, so it'll have to just be on watch to see if the president's visit moves the needle at all in that race.
All right, thank you, Danny.